The very first thing that's going to happen today is our fireside chat. This is going to be between Chaitra Vidulapalli and Saloni Shah. And let me just introduce them briefly. Chai is the co-founder of Women in Cloud, but she's not just that, she's a super rock star. She's a COO and founder of Mela. She's a Scorpio. I would just want to say she's a digital strategist, a board member. She's been in Forbes magazine, your story contributor. She's an entrepreneur, TEDx and public speaker. She's done strategic leadership, partnerships, top 100 global change leaders, influencer, seeking opportunities to contribute to public and private boards. That's what she puts all out there for you. So remember that when you need somebody on your board, because Chai's your person. And she's going to be talking with Saloni Shah, the Senior Portfolio Development Manager at M12, which is Microsoft's venture fund. She is a Libra. So this is going to be a very balanced conversation. She's considerate, a great listener, and very intelligent. Without further ado, let's get into this fireside chat on the state of business for women entrepreneurs post-COVID. Thank you. Let's go.
Thank you, Patty. Thank you. What a great introduction. My God, you really energized the community. So first is welcome, everyone. Pretty excited to see all of you today and really talk about the report about what is the state of female tech founders in the ecosystem. Let me set the stage, and I would love, Saloni, if you can also join me on the stage with me, that would be good. Let me talk about, when COVID hit last year, we had Senator Patty Kudrer. She asked how Women in Cloud founders are doing, and do we have a meaningful data to share with the legislators? And how are we serving them in the new normal, right? The new landscape. So after talking to Karen, Gretchen, Giovanna, and the entire board of advisors, we commissioned a COVID-19 impact survey to understand the state of the ecosystem and also the impact on the businesses. When we saw the data, we were more devastated with the results, and it was more worse than we anticipated. So the reports indicated that the average loss of revenue in the next 24 months across the female tech founders surveyed across 16 countries was around $500,000 to $1 million per company. And an additional $1 million to $5 million per company is expected loss over the next 3 years. So we know that the women entrepreneurs will face more complex challenges in setting up, growing, and sustaining their tech businesses. The gender stereotype and the lack of access to finance and complex societal threats like political instability and enormous uncertainty in the current market and a range of different barriers will prevent women from building businesses and also thriving. So it is particularly striking that majority of the women we got the research and data from said that the COVID-19 pandemic is probably the single greatest challenge they have ever faced. So in partnership with M12 Ventures, which is the Microsoft venture fund, we again commissioned the COVID-19 research for the 2021 to really understand the comparison and see if something has changed, or is it getting worse? So Olivia will be sharing the results and also the recommendations, the work. But what I'm really excited is to have Saloni Shah. She's the Senior Portfolio Development Director at M12 Microsoft Venture Fund, join us and really have a meaningful discussion on this particular topic. So Saloni, welcome to Women in Cloud. We are really excited to have you here. So first we want to start with your zodiac sign and your role at M12, and how do you serve the ecosystem of tech founders?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Great. Well, thank you so much for having me today. I'm really excited to be here and in support of Women in Cloud. As you said, Chaitra, my name is Saloni Shah. I am a Libra, so I'm incredibly balanced. You're right, Patty. I seek balance in everything I do. I'm also very energetic and extroverted. And I think the other core trait is I'm super diplomatic. I'm constantly the mediator in my family. So that's a big Libra trait that I definitely embody. As for me and my role, I am a portfolio development manager at M12, which essentially means I work with our portfolio companies that we invest in to accelerate their growth post-investment through the Microsoft ecosystem. So how can I support our companies in growing through partnerships with Microsoft on product integrations, go-to-market strategy, co-marketing, kind of all of the above. And I also support other large-scaled programs for the fund. One of the main ones is I am kind of the lead of the diversity, equity, and inclusion work that we do as a fund, and I run a program called the M12 Expert Network, which essentially is our way of building connections with experts inside of Microsoft to our portfolio companies for advising engagements. So that's me. In terms of how I support the ecosystem, that really comes from my DEI role. I think about how we structure our D&I initiatives, and one of the big pieces is our ecosystem play. How do we partner with organizations who are doing great work, like Women in Cloud and other venture funds who are doing great work in this space to empower more female entrepreneurs, and make sure we're evangelizing their work and their initiatives.
Awesome, Saloni. First is welcome. I think the partnership with M12 has been one of the fruitful partnership because we are able to do some really cool stuff. And since, you had, in partnership with you, we did commission, the commissioning of the report for this year happened, and you got to see the data firsthand. So what stood out from you from last year to this year? What did you take away from that?
Yeah, I think there are a couple things that stood out to me, and I know we're going to talk a little bit more about, solutions to these things, but the three categories are really the revenue loss, that it was projected higher than expected, 50 to 100,000 almost. The second thing is that we still have founders reporting that they're facing investment freezes, canceled and delayed projects, reduced healthcare because they have to reduce staff, and just loss of income, which is really hard to read. And then the emotional kind of impact of higher stress levels, both for the founders and the female entrepreneurs, but also for their staff, and how to deal with this new world of hybrid work that pain hasn't yet fully reduced. I mean, there's additional costs when it comes to operational endeavors to make that happen. So those are a couple things that stood out to me.
And Saloni, as a tech entrepreneur, I can relate to all of them, especially the emotional, I would say the impact, especially going into the hybrid workforce. You don't know what's the right thing, what's not the right thing, should we spend, shouldn't we spend? So it's been really a roller coaster ride for the last, I would say, 2 months, as I'm thinking through how the world is going to open up and how we are going to serve the women's ecosystem. And how do we serve in the tech industry a little bit better? So well said. So what are you seeing from a trends perspective as you're, that is making you pause or explore pivots to shape the investments and guidance for your portfolio companies?
Yeah, so I'll talk about this in two categories. One, as someone who focuses on supporting portfolio companies, I'm seeing two big things. One, like a major shift on digital marketing. I think often B2B companies, sales can be very relationship based and trade show based or conference based. But in the last 2 years, companies have had to figure out digital marketing, how to get lead gen online, how to use things like advertising, Microsoft advertising, Google advertising, LinkedIn marketing, to get that lead generation that they weren't getting from conferences. And so how can I support my companies in building that skill and hiring for that? And the second thing I'll say is, as M12 at least leads more rounds in the Series A space right now, talent and recruitment, finding your next 6 engineers, finding your next 6 sellers has been a huge trend or challenge that I'm hearing from entrepreneurs. How do I scale my team? In terms of investment trends as M12, I think this past year, we've thought a lot about cybersecurity. I mean, we already have an extensive cybersecurity portfolio, but you see these challenges in the news. SolarWinds, you may have gotten a notification just last week saying, update your Windows because of a hack. We are constantly looking for the most innovative things in cybersecurity because of everything that's happening now that we are all digitally transformed. I think Satya said it's, decades of digital transformation in 1 year that occurred in 2020. And then I would say we're also looking at spaces things that can uniquely help with hybrid work when it comes to investing. And lastly, going in early stage. A lot of investors, I think, are moving towards supporting entrepreneurs, making more early Series A seed investments and doing more early stage investments. So those are some of the trends that I'm seeing in the market.
And Saloni, I can echo that, like, from a Women in Cloud perspective, we actually implement the marketplace strategy in alignment for the Microsoft marketplace, and with the 3% flat fee for transaction.
Yeah,
that's really good. And if you heard Gina, she basically involved us in the build for 2030 to really give scaled marketing access. So that has given a lot of boost and visibility for our entrepreneurs. And you are right, like from a talent acquisition perspective, I think it applies for corporate as well as for entrepreneurs. In parallel, we are running the Cloud Recruitment Lounge so that people can find the talent, easily connect with the future talent. And from a hybrid work perspective, I don't know if you saw, one of our cohort members was featured on Satya's presentation. Of all the 32 solutions, we had one represented. So we were very well represented through the whole ecosystem. But I think we are all aligned in what you are seeing and what we are seeing. And Saloni, the data was resonated with you when you saw it. What do you believe that we should go and double down on investment for the next 3 years? Because we do want to think about, yes, we have the report, we have the insight, but how do we double down on it? And where are you thinking about doubling down?
Yeah, so I'll share a couple data points here and what I think might be an interesting thing to double down on. So the first one is definitely from the COVID-19 report, both 2020 and the unreleased one that you'll hear more about later today. This loss of revenue that we keep hearing about. I really think that data point is alarming, and customer acquisition has been very challenging in the pandemic. So one of the things I think especially organizations like Women in Cloud can do in partnership with corporations and venture funds is focus on supplier diversity. In my preparation for this fireside chat, I actually met with our head of supplier diversity, and she shared with me, I'm not sure if you know, the federal limit for supplier diversity is 51% ownership of your company or small business. That often doesn't work for venture-backed businesses because of the dilution of ownership you have when you take on venture capital funding, although the payout for women can be much higher, right? And so we want more female founders in that space. But because of that federal limit, often you don't get the certification to meet supplier diversity programs. Well, what I found out is Microsoft's actually working with the National Minority Supplier Development Council. That's a mouthful. But we're working with this organization that actually creates a certification for venture-backed female founders to qualify for these supplier diversity programs. So how can we work together to ensure that women entrepreneurs know about this and that they're applying for that certification and they're leveraging these supplier diversity programs that someone in the intro video even talked about to fill those gaps of revenue loss. So that's the first kind of thing I do think we should double down on. And that's included with the marketplace listing that you described earlier, using Microsoft and other corporations as channel sales mechanisms. The second thing I'll say is in the Women at Workplace report by McKinsey and Lean In, man, I read about the Women in Leadership broken rug. And that kind of breaks my heart to read, which is basically there's a huge barrier for women to hit that first manager role. To give you some data points, at the manager level, it's about 68% men, 38% women, and 12% women of color at that first manager role. And so you can see as you keep going up, there are less and less women in leadership. So my solution here is, can organizations work together, one, to track this data and be transparent about it? I mean, the Microsoft D&I report has diversity at multiple levels of the organization. So you can see, are we actually making growth everywhere, or are we just making growth at the pipeline entry individual contributor layers? And I think even if you're a small organization, the earlier you track, the more representative your organization is going to be as you keep going forward. So that's the second thing. And then the third and last thing I'll say is, when I read the All-Raise annual report recently, they talked a lot about the funding gap and the female check writer percentages. And the funding gap is essentially in 2020, female-led and mixed gender mixed gender founding teams saw a decrease in funding from 16.9% to 14.4%. So that's really sad, honestly, to see it go backwards after so much work. And then also, female check writers in 2020 only grew from 12.2% to 13.3%. And that means we need a lot more female investors in the ecosystem. And what can we do to improve that? In my opinion, no matter what organization you are, is to have an ecosystem approach, to partner with organizations like Women in Cloud, like Black and Brown Founders, like All Raise, that are doing great work in community building and curriculum and connection, so that we can move the needle on the funding gap and move the needle on how many women are actually writing investment checks. So those are some of my thoughts on the recent data I've read.
Yeah, and Saloni, I think we want to double down on definitely that certification, because most of the women do not want to go raise money because that gets diluted.
Yeah.
And they really go into the enterprise ecosystem easily too, because they don't have that certification status. And from the representation standpoint, I completely agree with you. We have to look holistically from the board of directors to the last level in every facet, from channel to supplier to employee to leader. We have to look at it, and we have to have a holistic approach on it. That is perfect. So we want to partner with you more for years to come, till 2030, till we get the goals accomplished.
Yeah.
So what do you think we should be focusing on getting access to funding, or should we be creating a holistic approach to solving access for women to build the tech companies? Because I know the pipeline is weak. So what do you think? Should we go holistic or just focus on only funding approach?
Yeah, I thought a lot about this. I think it has to be a holistic approach, but what I will say is you don't need to do it alone, right? Different organizations have different strengths, and Women in Cloud might bring something great, and then M12 might bring something else, right? We can bring some capital into the picture, and so I think it has to be holistic. I really love the spin wheel that Patty shared earlier. It seems like that's how Women in Cloud is thinking about it already. I'll share another framework that really resonated with me recently. It's Camelback Ventures' framework on how to support underrepresented founders, and it has 5 categories: coaching, capital, connections, community, and curriculum. And what I think is cool about this framework is that it has players, we have winners or really great organizations that cover some of these. So if I look at M12 and I say, are we supporting our founders in all of these things? They don't have to come from us, right? M12 can bring the capital and they can bring the connections to Microsoft, but we look to organizations like Women in Cloud to bring community and coaching and curriculum where that may not be our strong suit or our differentiator. And so I really think it does need to be a holistic approach. When we think about DEI at M12, we think about it holistically as well. We think about what's our plan for our team, like our team structure, our talent, our retention, our learning. What's our plan for our portfolio? So how are we supporting our companies that we've invested in growing their D&I journey and thinking about a representative staff? And how do we think about ecosystem? How do we partner with Women in Cloud, with Black and Brown Founders, with accelerators to increase our deal flow, but also evangelize the great work our partners are doing? So all that to say, I really do think it needs to be holistic, but let's lean on our partnerships where one might be better than the other, you know?
Absolutely. And Saloni, we are coming to the close of our conversation. So I have 2-pronged question. One is, should the tech companies, or what way should the tech companies and communities like ours should be partnering with the venture funding so we can create more access to female founders? And the last one is, do you have any closing thoughts for us?
So the first one is, should tech companies be partnering with female founders?
Yeah.
Okay.
And communities like ours.
Yeah, I mean, I think absolutely. The first point I already kind of made, I think let's work together on supplier diversity and work with these certification programs. I think second, like social capital is really important for female founders or underrepresented founders. So let's work together to create that social capital, right? Like we have a huge network inside of Microsoft. Women in Cloud has a huge network across female entrepreneurs in cloud. Let's work together to create that social capital so that, someone from your organization can pick up the phone and call someone at Microsoft about pitching to an executive, or someone at Microsoft can call someone in your organization to say, what solution do you have to my problem? And then I'll say, like, deal flow and pipeline is really important. I think that's how we need to work together as well. We as M12 may not have our line of sight into all of the amazing women entrepreneurs that are brewing across the world, and that we rely on our partners to hear about the entrepreneurs that you're seeing, to hear about the companies that they're starting, so we can deploy more capital into female-founded companies. So absolutely, I do think that we should be working together deeply. What was your last question?
Any closing thoughts for us?
Yeah. I think my closing thought is that I'm hopeful. I think the pandemic, I used to be a teacher. I used to be a middle school teacher. And I think the pandemic shone a light on broadband access in our country and how many students did not have access to technology. Just like that, I think in this ecosystem, the pandemic shone a light on the bias that exists, on the numbers decreasing, and how there needs to be persistent work being done. Some of the ways I see things changing: organizations are instituting flexible work hours, are putting more of a focus on paternal leave, are thinking about hybrid work and the barrier between work and life. And I also actually see on my day-to-day job, my founders that I work with thinking about representation early. How can we think about D&I when we only have a staff of 10? Like, I love to see that, because we know that when companies start diverse and start representative, they are much more likely to stay that way. When there are more women in leadership, there's often higher retention, higher staff morale, and we've seen female-founded companies are way more capitally efficient and do more with their capital. So I just appreciate that there's a light being shined on the issues right now, and I think we should take that momentum and continue the hard work. So I guess my last thought is I'm hopeful about all the progress that we can make between now and 2030, for sure.
Absolutely, Saloni. And this one was very enlightening for me. The conversation is, we are more aligned than we thought, so that's good. And we would love to keep the partnering going and really start to focus on supplier diversity, creating that connections and coaching for women entrepreneurs, and deal flow and pipeline. So if all the entrepreneurs who are listening here, please know that the Cloud Exec Connect is happening today. So female founders are going to meet with 40 advisors in the ecosystem. Hopefully some deals are going to be created today. Again, Saloni, thank you so much for being with us.